My name is Joshua. I'm 34 years old, and the moment my brother shoved my 10-year-old daughter's face into her birthday cake was the moment I lost my entire family. But before I tell you about the earth-shattering consequence that none of them saw coming, I want you to let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Now, let's go back to that day. The day my life broke into pieces, literally and figuratively. It was Lily's 10th birthday. For a single dad, hitting double digits is a massive milestone. Since my wife passed away 3 years ago, Lily has been my entire universe. She is the reason I drag myself out of bed at 5 in the morning every single day. She is the reason I work 60-hour weeks at a dusty construction site, hauling drywall and mixing cement just to keep a roof over our heads. Lily has a soul made of art and magic, just like her mother. She is obsessed with fairy tales, those stories where the good guys always win and the bad guys get exactly what they deserve. Life hadn't taught her yet that the real world doesn't always work that way. So, for her big 1-0, I decided to do something special. I couldn't afford those fancy custom cakes from a boutique bakery. I was living paycheck to paycheck, and the electric bill had just eaten up my savings. But I have steady hands and a background in architecture that I never got to use professionally. I stayed up for 3 nights straight. I baked a vanilla bean sponge from scratch and whipped up a strawberry buttercream that smelled like summer. But the decoration, that was where I poured my heart in. I hand-sculpted tiny mushrooms out of meringue. I spun sugar into glass-like windows. I built a literal fairy cottage out of white chocolate in the center of the cake. When I finished, it wasn't just dessert. It was a promise. It was me telling her, I know Mom isn't here, but I will build magic for you with my bare hands. To buy the ingredients, the high-quality chocolate, the real vanilla beans, the edible gold dust, I had to make a sacrifice. I sold my watch. It wasn't a Rolex or anything, just a decent Seiko my wife had given me on our first anniversary. It hurt to let it go, but looking at that cake, looking at the little sugar door I had carved, I knew it was worth it. The party was at my parents' house. My mother, Victoria, had reluctantly agreed to let us use the backyard. She always complained that my apartment was too cramped and smelled like poverty, though she'd never say it that directly. She just wanted to control the optics. She wanted the neighbors to see that she was a benevolent grandmother hosting a lovely event. We arrived early to set up. Lily was wearing this pale blue dress we found at a thrift store. I had spent all night ironing it until it looked brand new. She looked like a little angel. She kept circling the cake table, her eyes wide, afraid to touch it. "Daddy, this is the most beautiful thing in the world," she whispered, her breath fogging up the air slightly. "I don't even want to eat it." I smoothed her hair back, my hands rough and calloused against her soft cheek. "Cakes are made to be eaten, sweetheart. It's magic on the inside, too. But we have to wait for Uncle Caleb and Grandpa," she said, looking toward the patio door. And that is where the trouble started. Caleb, my older brother, the golden child, arrived 2 hours late. Caleb is 38. He drives a sports car my dad pays the lease on and wears Italian suits he didn't earn. Caleb has always been the protagonist of our family movie, while I was just the extra in the background. He has bankrupted 2 startups, yet my parents treat him like he's a visionary genius, funding his lifestyle out of their retirement savings. The guests were getting restless. My neighbor, Mrs. Gable, was checking her watch every 5 minutes. The ice in the punch bowl had melted, but my father, Nicholas, insisted we wait. "He's a busy man, Joshua," Dad said, sipping his iced tea. "He's closing deals. You wouldn't understand the pressure of the corporate world." I didn't say anything. I knew Caleb wasn't closing deals. I knew he was likely at a bar or sleeping off a hangover. But in the court of Nicholas and Victoria, Caleb could do no wrong. When Caleb finally strutted into the backyard, the smell of expensive cologne couldn't hide the stench of stale whiskey. He was stumbling, a glass of scotch already in his hand. Sorry, he laughed, his voice too loud for the quiet gathering. "Busy people can't be tied to a clock, right? Happy birthday, kiddo." He didn't even use her name. He walked right past Lily without looking at her. My dad, Nicholas, sat at the head of the patio table like a king holding court. He waved his hand dismissively at Caleb's tardiness. "It's fine, son. You're here now. Sit down, Caleb. You work too hard." I gripped the edge of the table until my knuckles turned white. Work? Caleb hadn't worked a real day in his life. He spent his days networking on golf courses and his nights gambling away the allowance Dad gave him. But I stayed quiet. For Lily, I didn't want to ruin her day. "Okay," I said, forcing a smile that felt like it might crack my face. "Time for candles. Come on, everyone." I lit the 10 candles. The tiny flames danced in the gentle breeze. The fairy cottage in the center of the cake glowed warmly. It was perfect. For a second, the tension faded. "Make a wish, Lily," I said softly. Lily closed her eyes. Her small hands clasped against her chest. The candlelight danced on her innocent face. I knew exactly what she was wishing for. She was wishing her mom could see this. She was wishing that, for once, she felt like she mattered to these people. Just as Lily took a deep breath to blow out the candles, Caleb stood up. He swayed dangerously, looming over the table. He stared at the fairy cottage I had spent 72 hours constructing. His eyes were glassy and mean. "What the hell is this?" Caleb slurred, pointing a shaking finger at the chocolate house. "You made this, Joshua? God, it looks so girly." I stiffened. "It's a fairy cottage, Caleb. It's for a 10-year-old girl." "Real men build real houses," Caleb sneered, looking down at my construction boots. "They don't play with candy. You always were soft, Josh, playing with your little dolls and your little ovens." "Caleb, shut up," I said, my voice low. "Let her blow out the candles." "Oh, lighten up. I'm just joking." Caleb rolled his eyes. He looked at Lily, then at the cake. A cruel, intrusive thought seemed to cross his mind, and his eyes glazed over with malice. "You know what this cake needs?" he asked, a wicked grin spreading across his face. "A taste test." Before I could even process what was happening, Caleb swung his hand. "Here, have a bite, princess." He grabbed the back of Lily's neck. His grip was aggressive, violent. He shoved her face down into the cake. Crunch. That sound. It still haunts my nightmares. It wasn't a soft squish. The structural chocolate shattered. The sugar glass windows snapped. Lily's face hit the dense sponge cake with a sickening thud. She screamed. It wasn't a laugh. It was a shriek of pure terror and pain. Lily flailed back, lifting her head. Her beautiful face was covered in smashed cream and crumbs. But worse, there was blood. A shard of the hard sugar glass had scratched her cheek, just below the eye. Buttercream was in her eyes. She was coughing, choking on cake, screaming, "Daddy, my eyes! It burns!" Caleb threw his head back and laughed. A loud, braying, donkey-like laugh. "Look at her," he roared, pointing. "She looks like a clown. Happy birthday." The red mist descended. In that second, I wasn't the submissive younger brother. I wasn't the disappointment. I was a father. I launched myself across the table. I didn't care about the guests. I didn't care about the consequences. I shoved Caleb hard in the chest. "Are you out of your mind?" I shouted. Caleb, drunk and off balance, tripped over a lawn chair and fell onto the grass. His scotch glass went flying. My mother shrieked, but she didn't run to Lily. "Caleb! Oh my God! Are you okay?" Victoria ran, past her crying, bleeding granddaughter to help the 38-year-old man up from the grass. She started brushing dirt off his suit jacket. "Look at this. It's Armani. It's grass-stained. Joshua, look what you did." No one, not even my mother, looked at Lily. I was on my knees, frantically using napkins to wipe the frosting out of Lily's eyes, my heart breaking as she sobbed into my shoulder. The cut on her cheek was bleeding freely now, mixing with the pink frosting. "Dad!" I turned to look at my father, Nicholas. I needed him to step in. I needed him to be the patriarch. I needed him to execute justice. Nicholas stood up slowly. He looked at Caleb, who was fake groaning on the ground. He looked at the ruined cake, the symbol of my love, destroyed on the table. And then he looked at me. His eyes were cold, dead. He took off his heavy gold signet ring, the family ring he was so proud of, the one he swore would go to the son who earned it. He slammed it down onto the glass patio table. Bang! The backyard went deathly silent. The only sound was Lily's whimpering. My father pointed a trembling finger at me. I thought finally he was going to defend us. "You dare!" he roared. "You dare put your hands on your brother over a stupid piece of cake?" I froze. My brain couldn't compute the words. "Dad." He shoved her face into it. "She's bleeding. There was glass sugar. She's hurt." "It was a joke," my father bellowed, his face turning purple. "It was a man's joke. You have always been this way, Joshua. Too sensitive. Too soft. Caleb is the eldest. He was toughening her up. And you respond with violence against your own flesh and blood." My mother chimed in, her voice shrill. "Exactly, Joshua. Look at Caleb's suit. We have a dinner with investors next week. Do you know how much dry cleaning costs for this fabric? That cake was nothing. You can just bake another one. Stop making a scene and ruining the party." I looked at them. I really looked at them. These people, they were strangers. They didn't care about Lily. They never had. "You call that a joke?" I asked, my voice shaking with a rage I had suppressed for 3 decades. "Lily is 10. She is terrified. And you're worried about his dry cleaning? If you don't know how to behave in this family," my father stated, his voice dropping to a terrifyingly calm register, "then get out. I don't have a son who is petty, jealous, and disrespectful. Walk out that gate," he pointed to the fence, "and don't come back until you are ready to get on your knees and apologize to your brother." The silence that followed my father's ultimatum was heavier than the concrete bags I hauled every day. It hung in the damp air of the backyard, suffocating me. Get on my knees? Apologize to the man who had just assaulted my daughter? I looked down at Lily. She was gripping my shirt so tight her knuckles were white. One eye was swollen shut from the sugar irritation. "Let's go, Daddy," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Please, I want to go home." Home, I thought. Our home was a basement apartment that smelled of mildew, but suddenly, it felt like a palace compared to this toxic wasteland. I scooped Lily up into my arms. She was getting too big to carry, but in that moment she felt weightless. I didn't say another word to my parents. I didn't look at the smirk that was creeping back onto Caleb's face as he dusted off his pants, realizing he had won again. He always won. I walked straight out the gate into the gray, drizzling afternoon. I didn't look back. I lost my family that day, but looking back now, I realize I didn't lose anything. I was just taking out the trash. The drive away from my parents' wealthy neighborhood was a blur of rain and tears. My old pickup truck rattled as we hit the potholes, the wipers fighting a losing battle against the sudden storm. Lily sat in the passenger seat, curled into a tight ball, holding a bag of ice I'd grabbed from the cooler on my way out against her cheek. I had used a water bottle to clean the rest of the sticky cream off her face, but the smell of strawberry and vanilla, a smell that should have been happy, now filled the cab with the stench of humiliation. "Daddy." Lily's voice was small, barely audible over the engine. "Is it my fault? Did I do something bad? Is that why Uncle Caleb did that?" That question felt like a physical blow to my gut, took the air right out of my lungs. "No, Lily," I said, gripping the steering wheel so hard the leather creaked. "No, baby, you did nothing wrong. Uncle Caleb is a bully. And Grandpa and Grandma, they were wrong too. But Grandpa told you to leave," she sniffled. "He never yells at Uncle Caleb. Even when Uncle Caleb broke the vase last Christmas." I bit my lip until I tasted iron. She noticed. Of course, she noticed. Kids see everything. The unfairness wasn't new. It was the foundation our family was built on. As I drove, the windshield wipers slapping a rhythmic beat, My mind was dragged back to the past. The dynamic was ancient. I remembered being 12 years old. Caleb, 16 at the time, had been throwing a baseball in the house, despite Mom's strict rule. He missed a catch and the ball went straight through the antique glass cabinet. When Dad got home, Caleb didn't even blink. He pointed at me and said, "Joshua did it. I told them to stop. I tried to defend myself. I begged them to believe me. But Dad just took off his belt. He didn't whip me for the glass. He whipped me for lying and blaming my brother." Caleb stood at the top of the stairs, watching me take the punishment, grinning like a shark. I was the scapegoat. He was the golden child. That was the unwritten contract. As I got older, the stakes got higher. It wasn't just broken glass anymore. It was my future. I was always the academic one. I graduated high school with honors and got accepted into a prestigious architecture program. I had dreams. I wanted to build skyscrapers. I wanted to leave a mark on the skyline. But the week before tuition was due, my parents sat me down at the kitchen table. "Joshua," Dad had said, not looking me in the eye, "we need to talk about your college fund." "I know," I had said eagerly. "I have the deposit ready from my summer job. I just need the check for the tuition." "The money isn't there," Mom interrupted, buttering her toast as if she were discussing the weather. "What?" "Caleb needed capital for his business venture," Dad said, his voice firm, daring me to challenge him. "He has an entrepreneurial spirit, Joshua. He's going to make this family millions. We transferred your fund to his account. He needs it more right now. You gave him my college fund? You're good with your hands," Dad shrugged. "You should go to trade school. Be a mechanic or a builder. It's honest work, and it's cheaper." They stole my future to fund Caleb's first failed business, a high-end gym that closed in 6 months because he spent all the budget on launch parties and forgot to buy equipment. They clipped my wings so he could pretend to fly. And now they were trying to do the same thing to my daughter. They were teaching her that her dignity didn't matter as much as Caleb's ego. I looked over at Lily. She had fallen asleep, exhausted by the trauma. Her cheek was puffy where the sugar glass had scratched her. "Never again," I whispered to the rain. I pulled the truck over to the side of the road. My hands were shaking, but my mind was crystal clear. I pulled out my phone. 15 missed calls from Mom. 3 texts from Caleb. I opened Caleb's text thread. "You're such a coward. Dad is furious. You better turn that truck around and apologize to him and me right now, or you can kiss your inheritance goodbye. Don't be an idiot, Joshua." Inheritance. Money. That was the leash they always used to yank me back. They thought the promise of some future payout would make me swallow my pride forever. They thought I would sell my daughter's self-worth for a slice of their pie. I typed one response. My thumbs hammered the screen. "Keep your money. Keep the inheritance. I have something more valuable in the passenger seat. We are done." I hit send. Then I went to my contacts. Blocked Mom. Blocked Dad. Blocked Caleb. Blocked every aunt and cousin who stood there silently watching my daughter bleed. I threw the phone onto the dashboard. We had nowhere to go but our tiny, damp apartment. I didn't know how I was going to explain this to Lily when she woke up. I didn't know if my construction wages would be enough to get her braces or pay for her own college fund one day. I didn't know how I would afford a lawyer if they tried to sue me for something petty, just to be spiteful. But as I merged back onto the highway, the city lights beginning to twinkle in the distance, I felt something I hadn't felt in 34 years. Lighter. The weight of their expectations, their cruelty, their gaslighting. It was gone. I was poor. I was alone. But I was free. And I was going to build a life so strong that they could never knock it down again. The months that followed were, quite frankly, hell on earth. When you cut off a toxic family, nobody tells you about the silence. You expect the peace, but you don't expect the weird, hollow feeling that comes on Sunday afternoons when you realize there's no obligatory dinner to attend. You don't expect the panic when an emergency bill comes in and you realize there is absolutely no safety net. If I fell, we crashed. Lily and I were living in a basement apartment on the edge of the city. It smelled like mildew and the heater rattled like a dying engine. But it was ours. No one yelled there. No one walked on eggshells. To make up for the rent and to start rebuilding a savings account for Lily's future, I worked like a machine. My body became a tool, hammered and hardened by necessity. My days started at 5 a.m. at the construction site. I worked under a foreman named Ryan, a guy who reminded me too much of Caleb. Ryan loved to push me around because he knew I was overqualified. He knew I could read the blueprints better than the architects, and he hated me for it. "Hey, college boy," Ryan would yell, kicking a pile of debris toward me. "Less thinking, more lifting. That drywall isn't going to hang itself." I hauled concrete, hung drywall, and breathed in dust until my lungs burned. My back ached constantly. My hands were covered in cuts and calluses. But every time I felt like quitting, I thought of Lily's face on her birthday. I thought of the scratch on her cheek, and I lifted another bag of cement. At 5 p.m., I'd clock out, rush to pick Lily up from her after-school program, feed her dinner, help her with homework, and tuck her in. Then, at 8 p.m., Mrs. Gable, not the neighbor from my parents' house, but a kind older lady in our building who became our lifeline, would come sit with Lily while I went to my second job. I was a dishwasher at Elena's Patisserie, the most upscale bakery in the city. I was the invisible man there. I stood at the back sink, scrubbing burnt caramel off pans and scraping dough out of mixing bowls until my hands were raw and blistered. The hot water stung my cuts, but the steam kept me warm. But my eyes were always watching. I watched the pastry chefs mix batter. I watched them temper chocolate, and mostly I watched them fail at structure. The head pastry chef, a guy named Marco, was a flavor genius but an architectural disaster. He tried to build towering wedding cakes, but he didn't understand physics. He didn't understand load-bearing walls or center of gravity. I'd see him stacking tiers that were clearly unstable, using dowels that were too thin. Gravity doesn't work like that, I'd think to myself as I scrubbed a pot. But who was going to listen to the dishwasher? I was just the guy who cleaned the mess, not the one who made it. Until one fateful Saturday. It was the biggest order of the year. The mayor's daughter was getting married, and she had ordered a 5-foot-tall replica of the Eiffel Tower made entirely of chocolate and cake. It was a 5-figure contract, a make-or-break moment for the bakery. Disaster struck at 9 a.m. Marco slipped on a wet floor near the walk-in freezer and broke his wrist. He was rushed to the hospital. Chaos erupted in the kitchen. The sous chefs were panicking. They were good bakers, but they weren't engineers. They tried to assemble the tower based on Marco's sketch, but it kept leaning. The chocolate girders were snapping under the weight of the sponge cake. Elena, the owner, a fierce, intimidating Italian woman who rarely smiled, was pacing the floor, looking like she was about to have a heart attack. "We are ruined," she muttered, wringing her hands. "The delivery van is here in 3 hours. We cannot send this pile of garbage to the mayor. My reputation, it will be gone." The kitchen was silent, filled only with the smell of panic and melting chocolate. I was at the sink, elbows deep in soapy water. I looked at the leaning tower. I knew exactly why it was failing. The base wasn't reinforced. The load distribution was all wrong. The torque on the second tier was too high. I wiped my hands on my dirty apron. I took a step forward. "Mrs. Elena," I said. My voice was raspy from lack of use. Everyone turned to look at me. One of the sous chefs scoffed. "Get back to the sink, Joshua. We don't need clean dishes right now. We need a miracle." "I can fix it," I said, ignoring him. I looked straight at Elena. "You?" Elena looked at me with skepticism. She looked at my construction boots, my calloused hands, my stained t-shirt. "You are the dishwasher, Joshua." "I used to study architecture," I said firmly, "and I work in construction. Your problem isn't the chocolate. It's the physics. The internal supports are placed wrong. The torque is snapping the beams. Give me 2 hours. I can re-engineer the frame using hard candy supports and redistribute the weight. Maybe it was desperation. Maybe she saw the fire in my eyes. Elena hesitated, then nodded. If you ruin it, you're fired, she said. But since we are already dead, go ahead. I stepped up to the prep table. I took a deep breath. Suddenly, the kitchen wasn't a kitchen anymore. It was a job site. The chocolate wasn't food. It was concrete. The sugar was glass. I worked with a focus I hadn't felt in years. I melted down hard candy to create rigid I-beams. I used tempered chocolate as welding material. I calculated the angles. I shaved millimeters off the cake layers to adjust the center of mass. My hands, rough from carrying bricks, moved with a delicacy and precision that surprised even me. I reinforced the foundation, creating a hidden truss system inside the cake legs. I felt alive. For the first time since my parents stole my college fund, I was building something. 2 hours later, the Eiffel Tower stood on the table. 5 feet tall, perfectly straight, structurally sound. I had even brushed it with gold luster dust so it caught the light like the real thing at sunset. I stepped back, wiping sweat from my forehead. The kitchen was dead silent. Elena walked up to the tower. She tapped one of the chocolate legs. It didn't budge. It was solid as a rock. She turned to me slowly. Her eyes were welling up. "Joshua," she whispered. "How?" "Just balancing the load, ma'am." I shrugged, turning back to my pile of dirty dishes. "I'll get back to the sink." "Stop," Elena commanded. She walked over and grabbed my arm. Her grip was strong. "You are never touching that sink again," she said, her voice shaking with emotion. "You have hands of gold, Joshua. Do not waste them cleaning up other people's messes. From today, you build." That day, my salary didn't just triple. My life changed. I wasn't just a construction worker anymore. I was a cake architect, and I knew deep down that this was just the beginning. I had found my weapon. Now I just needed to sharpen it. Elena kept her word. I hung up my dishwasher apron and put on a chef's coat. But I wasn't just baking cookies. I was designing edible structures. Word spread fast. In the high-end world of weddings and corporate galas, people were bored with standard cakes. They wanted spectacles. They wanted cakes that defied gravity, cakes that spun, cakes that lit up. And I was the only one in the city who could engineer them. I applied the same rigorous math I used in construction to sugar. I created a line called Edible Structures. My first solo project was a replica of the city skyline for a real estate mogul. I used pulled sugar for the windows and dark chocolate ganache for the steel beams. When the mogul saw it, he tried to hire me to design his actual building. I politely declined. I had found my medium. Within 2 years, I had saved enough to move Lily and me out of the basement. We got a nice 2-bedroom apartment with big windows and a balcony where we could grow tomatoes. I started putting money into a real college fund for her, one that no one could steal. But I didn't stop there. I was hungry, not for food, but for redemption. I started my own company, J&L Legacy Creations. J for Joshua, L for Lily. We operated out of a converted warehouse in the Arts District. It was gritty, industrial, and perfect. 5 years passed. 5 years of grinding. 5 years of waking up early and going to bed late. 5 years of ignoring the voicemails my mother left on holidays, pretending that everything was fine. I had transformed. The beaten-down man who walked out of that backyard was gone. In his place was a man who wore tailored charcoal suits, not because he wanted to show off, but because he was meeting with clients who owned islands. I drove a Porsche Panamera, black on black. It was a frivolous purchase, maybe, but every time I started the engine, it roared like the anger I still carried inside. I was successful. I was respected. But I wasn't whole. There was still a jagged edge in my heart where my family used to be. One Tuesday in late October, I was in my glass-walled office overlooking the production floor. My team of 12 bakers was working on a suspended cake for a tech billionaire, a floating city held up by magnetic levitation. My assistant, Landon, buzzed in. Boss, he said, his voice hesitant. You have a visitor. She didn't have an appointment, but she says it's urgent. She says she's family. My hand froze over the blueprint I was reviewing. Family. That word was a ghost in this building. I don't have family, Landon. You know that. She said her name is Sarah, Landon said softly. She's crying, Joshua, and she has a black eye. Sarah, Caleb's wife. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. Sarah had always been quiet. She was a trophy wife, yes, but she wasn't malicious like Caleb. She was just present. Send her in, I said. When Sarah walked in, I barely recognized her. The pristine country club woman was gone. This woman looked haunted. Her designer coat was frayed at the cuffs, and she hadn't slept in days. She was clutching a thick leather binder to her chest like a shield. And Landon was right. There was a bruise blooming on her cheekbone, poorly covered with makeup. I stood up. Sarah? Joshua? She breathed. She looked around my office, at the awards on the shelf, at the view of the city. My God, the rumors were true. You really are the one behind J&L. Hello, Sarah, I said, keeping my distance. I didn't offer her a seat. I couldn't afford to be soft. Why are you here? I'm leaving him, she blurted out. Tears instantly spilled over her lashes. I filed for divorce this morning. I took the kids and left. I felt a flicker of sympathy, but I stamped it out. I'm sorry to hear that, but I fail to see what that has to do with me. He's going to destroy me, Joshua, she said, her voice shaking with panic. Caleb, he's fighting for full custody, not because he loves the boys. He barely knows their birthdays. He wants custody so he can control my trust fund. He's claiming I'm mentally unstable. He hired the most expensive sharks in the city. And you want money? I asked, reaching for my checkbook. I can help with legal fees, for old time's sake. No, she slammed the binder onto my desk. I don't want your money. I want you to bury him. I looked at the binder. It was labeled RD Construction, Internal Ledgers 2020 to 2025. What is this? The smoking gun, Sarah whispered. You know your dad's company is in trouble, right? Everyone knows they are hemorrhaging cash. They are weeks away from declaring bankruptcy. I nodded. I knew. I had been watching their stock valuation plummet for months. It was my morning ritual, coffee and watching my father's legacy burn. Caleb has been blaming the market, Sarah said, her voice hardening. He blames the economy, the unions, the supply chain. But it's him, Joshua. It's always been him. I opened the binder. It was a forensic accounting of the last 5 years. Sarah had copied the hard drive. My eyes scanned the columns. It was worse than I thought. It was a slaughter. There were withdrawals for consulting fees to shell companies registered in the Cayman Islands. There were company credit card charges for trips to Vegas, jewelry stores, and luxury car leases, all marked as business expenses. He's been embezzling, I said, the realization settling in my gut like cold lead. He's been stealing from Dad. Does Dad know? Nicholas thinks Caleb is a genius who is just having a run of bad luck, Sarah scoffed bitterly. Your dad signed over power of attorney to Caleb 2 years ago when he had that mild stroke. He doesn't check the books anymore. He trusts his golden child. She pointed to a figure at the bottom of page 10. $3.5 million, Sarah said. That's what he siphoned out. That includes the employee's pension fund and the equity in your parents' house. I looked up sharply. The house. He forged their signatures, Sarah said. He took out a second mortgage on the estate. If the company goes under, the bank takes the house. Your parents will be homeless. I closed the binder. My heart was pounding, not with fear, but with a strange, cold adrenaline. Why bring this to me? I asked. Why not the police? Because if I go to the police, the assets get frozen. The lawyers take years. I need him stopped now, Sarah said. And because I know what they are doing tomorrow. She leaned in, her eyes intense. They are selling the company. Or trying to. They are meeting with a private equity firm called Legacy Holdings tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. They are desperate to sell a controlling interest to get a cash injection to cover the payroll fraud before the auditors come next week. I stayed silent. Legacy Holdings, Sarah repeated. She looked at the logo on my wall, J&L Legacy Creations. Joshua, it's you, isn't it? I looked at her. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I picked up the phone on my desk and dialed Landon's extension. Landon, I said, my voice steady. Call our legal team. Tell Andrew to prep the acquisition papers for RD Construction. And tell him I'll be leading the meeting personally tomorrow. I hung up and looked at Sarah. You'll get your custody, I told her. And Caleb won't just lose his wife. Tomorrow, he loses his kingdom. Sarah let out a sob of relief, covering her face with her hands. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in my study, looking at the evidence. I thought about the birthday cake. I thought about the ring slamming on the table. I thought about Lily asking if she was a bad girl. I wasn't just going to buy a company. I was going to perform an exorcism. The morning of the meeting, the sky was a bruised purple, heavy with rain, felt fitting. I stood in front of my full-length mirror. For 5 years, I had dressed for comfort and utility. Today, I dressed for war. I put on a bespoke 3-piece suit, midnight blue, the kind of fabric that absorbs light. I fastened a platinum watch to my wrist, a Patek Philippe that cost more than the house I grew up in. It replaced the Seiko I had sold for the cake ingredients. I combed my hair back, revealing the gray that had started to touch my temples. I didn't look like the soft, chubby kid who used to bake cookies anymore. I looked like a man who signed checks that could buy and sell souls. Dad, I turned. Lily was standing in the doorway of my bedroom. She was 15 now, tall and graceful, wearing her school uniform. She held a travel mug of coffee. You look scary, she said, half joking, but her eyes were serious. Is today the day? I took the coffee from her. Yeah, sweetie. Today is the day. Are you going to hurt them? She asked. No, I said gently. I'm just going to show them the mirror. Whatever they see in it, that's on them. She hugged me. Good luck. Make sure you get a receipt. I drove to the RD Construction headquarters alone. No chauffeur. I wanted to feel the steering wheel of the Porsche in my hands. I wanted to remember the drive I took in the rattling pickup truck 5 years ago. The building was a shadow of its former self. The landscaping was dead. The logo on the sign was faded. As I walked into the lobby, the receptionist, a temp who didn't know me, didn't even look up from her phone. Meeting for Legacy Holdings, I said. Boardroom, top floor, she mumbled, pointing to the elevator. The elevator ride was the longest 30 seconds of my life. Every floor indicator that lit up felt like a countdown. Ding. The doors opened. I walked down the hallway. I could hear voices from inside the boardroom. My father's voice. Stop pacing, Caleb. They'll be here. They have to be. The email said 9 a.m. sharp. I just don't like dealing with these shadow investors. Caleb's voice whined. Why wouldn't they send a name? Who is this legacy guy anyway? Who cares? My mother's voice. As long as the check clears, Caleb. Just fix your tie. You look like you slept in a dumpster. I adjusted my cuffs. I took a deep breath, and I pushed the double oak doors open. The heavy doors swung inward with a groan. 3 heads snapped toward me. The boardroom was dim, lit only by the gray light filtering through the rain-streaked windows. The long mahogany table was scarred and dusty. At the far end sat the triumvirate of my trauma. Nicholas, Victoria, and Caleb. For a solid 10 seconds, nobody spoke. They squinted at me. The silhouette of a man in a power suit standing in the doorway didn't compute with their memory of Joshua, the failure. Caleb broke the silence. He didn't recognize me. Finally, he huffed, throwing his hands up. You must be the rep from Legacy Holdings. You're late. We have a schedule to keep. I didn't say a word. I walked into the room, the heels of my Italian leather shoes clicking rhythmically on the parquet floor. Click. Click, click. I walked past the empty chairs. I walked past Caleb, catching the distinct smell of stale vodka and breath mints. I walked past my mother, who was staring at my watch with a confused frown. I walked straight to the head of the table, the end opposite my father. I pulled out the chair, sat down, and placed Sarah's thick binder on the table. Only then did I look up. My father was staring at me. His mouth was slightly open. His eyes were darting over my face, trying to reconcile the image. "Joshua?" he whispered. Came out as a question, weak and terrified. Caleb spun around in his chair. "What, Joshua?" He squinted, then let out a harsh, barking laugh. "Holy shit, it is Joshua." The shock on his face morphed instantly into sneering contempt. It was a reflex for him. "Wow." Caleb clapped slowly, sarcastically. "Look at you playing dress-up. Did you get a job as a driver for the investors? Is that it? You're here to fetch coffee before the real businessmen show up." "Joshua," my mother scolded, her voice finding its old, shrill rhythm. "You can't be in here. We are in the middle of a crisis. We are waiting for the owners of Legacy Holdings. If they see you here, honestly, have you no shame?" I leaned back in the chair, resting my elbows on the armrests. I interlaced my fingers. "I'm not the driver," I said. My voice was calm, deep, and filled the room without shouting. "And I'm not late. It's 9:01. Get out." Caleb slammed his hand on the table. "I'm not in the mood for your little reunion tour." "Security." "There is no security," I said simply. "You fired them last week to save money. Remember?" Caleb froze. "And you can stop waiting for Legacy Holdings," I continued, locking eyes with my father. "You're looking at him." "What?" my father croaked. "J&L Legacy," I enunciated clearly. "Joshua and Lily. Did you really think it was a coincidence?" That's impossible," my mother stammered, clutching her pearls. You bake cakes. You live in a basement. You don't have money. I have enough money to buy this building, burn it down, and rebuild it just for fun," I said coldly. "While your son was busy bankrupting you, I was building an empire. My salary isn't paid by Daddy anymore, Caleb. I sign my own checks." Caleb's face turned a violent shade of red. "You're lying. You're bluffing. You probably rented that suit. You're just here to gloat because you heard we were having a rough patch." "A rough patch?" I raised an eyebrow. "Is that what you call it?" I reached for the binder. "I'm here to make an offer," I said. "I will buy 100% of the assets of RD Construction. I will inject the capital needed to save the company from insolvency. I will ensure the 200 employees, people who actually work for a living, don't lose their jobs and pensions." You would do that?" My father's eyes welled up with tears. Hope. He saw a lifeline. "Joshua, son, I knew it. I knew you cared about the family legacy. But..." I cut him off, my voice sharpening like a knife blade. "There are conditions." "Anything," Dad said, desperate. "Anything. Condition number 1, I said. "I want to talk about the cake." "The cake?" Caleb looked confused. "What cake?" "Lily's 10th birthday cake," I said. "The one you destroyed. The one you laughed at." "Oh, for God's sake." Caleb rolled his eyes. "Are you seriously still harping on that? That was 5 years ago. It was a joke. Get over it, you sensitive little..." I stood up. I picked up the heavy binder of evidence. I walked over to where my father sat. I loomed over him. "You slammed your ring on the table," I said to my father softly. "Do you remember? You slammed your ring down and told me I was petty. You told me to get out." "Joshua, please," Dad whimpered, shrinking back. I lifted the binder high above my head. "This is my ring," I whispered. Wham! I slammed the binder onto the table with every ounce of strength I had. The sound was like a gunshot. The wood of the table actually cracked. My mother screamed. Caleb jumped out of his skin. "Read it," I roared. My father, shaking like a leaf, opened the binder. "What is this?" he gasped. "That," I said, pointing a finger at Caleb, "is the proof that your golden child is a thief. Look at page 10, Dad. Look at the withdrawals. $300,000 to a shell company. $50,000 for a boat. He stole it all," I said mercilessly. "The college funds for his own kids? Gone. Your retirement? Gone. The mortgage payments? Embezzled. He didn't just fail, Dad. He robbed you blind." My father looked up at Caleb. The betrayal in his eyes was absolute. "Caleb, tell me this isn't true." Caleb was backing away, his face pale as death. "Dad, listen. It's complicated. The market was tough. I just borrowed it. I was going to pay it back. You stole my life," Dad screamed, standing up and grabbing Caleb by the lapels. "I trusted you. I gave you everything. Sit down," I commanded. They both froze. The authority in my voice was undeniable. They sat. "Here is the offer," I said, smoothing my jacket. "I buy the company, but the board of directors is dissolved immediately. You, Dad. You, Mom. And you, Caleb. You are all fired. Today. Right now." The silence that followed my ultimatum was heavy, suffocating. It was the sound of three worlds ending at once. The immediate aftermath of that boardroom explosion felt like the settling of dust after a long overdue demolition. I watched as security, now hired by my firm, not theirs, escorted Caleb out of the building. He didn't go quietly. He kicked, he screamed, and he hurled insults until the elevator doors swallowed his voice. My father, Nicholas, sat at the mahogany table, looking like a man who had aged 20 years in 20 minutes. My mother, Victoria, kept whispering about what the neighbors at the country club would think. She still didn't get it. There was no country club anymore. There were only consequences. 6 months passed quickly. I didn't just buy the company. I gutted it. I brought in my own team, renamed the firm Legacy Structures, and began the grueling process of auditing every single project Caleb had touched. It was worse than Sarah's binder had suggested. He hadn't just stolen money. He had cut corners on safety, used substandard materials, and bribed inspectors. I had to spend millions more of my own money just to make things right for the clients. It was a matter of honor. My name was on the door now. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, I found myself driving through a part of town I usually avoided. It was a strip of dilapidated warehouses and car lots. I pulled my Porsche Panamera to the curb across from Smitty's Pre-Owned Autos. Through the chain-link fence, I saw a man in a cheap polyester suit that was 2 sizes too big. He was scrubbing the windshield of a rusted sedan with a dirty rag. It was Caleb. His hair was thinning, and the arrogance that used to radiate off him like heat had been replaced by a frantic, jittery energy. He looked like a man who spent his nights staring at the ceiling, wondering where the easy money went. He saw my car. He saw me. He didn't wave. He didn't shout. He just turned his back and started scrubbing harder, his shoulders hunched in shame. I didn't feel the surge of joy I thought I would. I just felt a profound sense of closure. The golden child was now a man selling junk to people who couldn't afford better. It was the most honest work he'd ever done. My parents fared little better. Without Caleb's investments and the company's dividends, their lifestyle collapsed like a house of cards. They had to sell the estate, the house where the birthday disaster happened. I bought it through a third party, not to live in it, but to ensure it was preserved and eventually sold to a family that actually loved each other. They moved into a small 2-bedroom condo in a retirement community. No pool, no gate, no prestige. I received a call from my father during that time. His voice was shaky, lacking the booming authority that used to make me tremble. "Joshua," he said, "your mother and I, we're having trouble with the HOA fees, and the heater in this place is making a strange noise. I was wondering if you could send someone over, or perhaps come by yourself. We could have a drink, like old times." I leaned back in my leather office chair, looking at a framed photo of Lily on my desk. I'm a busy man, Nicholas. I'm closing deals. You wouldn't understand the pressure of the corporate world. I used his own words against him. I didn't do it to be cruel. I did it to set a boundary. But we're family, he pleaded. Family is a verb, not a noun, I replied. It's something you do, not something you are by blood. You chose your son 5 years ago. I chose my daughter. We both have to live with those choices. I hung up. I didn't block him this time, but I didn't call back. The most rewarding part of this journey wasn't the bank account or the cars. It was Sarah and the kids. Sarah won full custody after I provided the forensic evidence of Caleb's embezzlement and his history of erratic behavior. She moved into a modest home near Lily's school. I set up an educational trust fund for my nephews, Leo and Marcus. I told Sarah that the money was for their college, their first homes, and their futures. I made sure there were legal ironclad clauses that forbade Caleb from touching a single cent. This is the inheritance our family should have had, I told her. It starts with them. This is the moment where I realized that the best revenge isn't making someone else suffer. It's living a life they can no longer touch. This is the moment I finally took back control of my narrative. Before I move on to the final chapter of this story, if you've stayed with me this long, you are incredible. This journey has been the hardest thing I've ever done, but knowing you're listening makes it worth it. Please, if this story resonates with you, hit that like button and comment the number 1 below. It lets me know I'm not alone in this, and it helps this message reach others who might be trapped in their own toxic families. Your support means the world to me. Lily's 16th birthday arrived on a warm, golden evening in June. Instead of a backyard with people who judged us, we were on the rooftop terrace of the City Museum of Art. The skyline of the city, the same skyline I had dreamed of building as a boy, twinkled around us like a million diamonds. The guest list was small but precious. Sarah was there, looking radiant and peaceful. My nephews were running around, laughing. Elena, the woman who gave a dishwasher a chance, sat in the front row. Chef Marco, his wrist long healed, was busy supervising the catering. These were the people who made up my real family, the family I chose. Then came the moment for the cake. I had spent a month on this one. It wasn't just a cake. It was a feat of engineering. I used magnetic levitation to make the top tier, a shimmering, crystalline castle, actually float and spin 3 inches above the base. It was made of spun sugar, white chocolate, and resilience. When I wheeled it out, the room went silent. But this time, it was a silence of awe, not of fear. Lily stood there, her eyes shimmering with tears. She wasn't that scared 10-year-old anymore. She was a confident young woman who knew her worth. She looked at the floating castle, then she looked at me. "It's perfect, Dad," she whispered. "No," I said, taking her hand. "You're perfect. The cake is just flour and sugar. You're the one who survived the storm." As the sun set, I stepped away from the crowd for a moment to look out at the city. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text message from an unknown number. I knew it was my mother. She used a different burner phone every few weeks to try and get through. "Joshua, please. It's your father's birthday next month. Just one dinner. We can put the past behind us. We miss you. We miss Lily. Don't be so heartless." I looked at the message. 5 years ago, this would have made me feel guilty. It would have made me feel like the bad son again. But now, I felt nothing. Heartless? No. My heart was full. It was just full of people who actually deserved to be there. I didn't hate them. Hate is a heavy emotion, and I didn't want to carry anything of theirs anymore. I felt an indifferent peace. I deleted the message. I blocked the number. I walked back to my daughter. She was surrounded by friends, laughing, her face clean and bright. There were no scratches, no frosting in her eyes, and no fear in her heart. I realized then that the golden child myth is a lie. There is no such thing as a golden child or a scapegoat by birth. There are only parents who are too weak to love their children equally and children who are strong enough to walk away. I am Joshua. I was the dishwasher. I was the construction worker. I was the disappointment. Today, I am the architect of my own happiness. And I promise you, if you are sitting in the dark right now, feeling like you'll never be enough for the people who are supposed to love you, you are wrong. You are the architect. You have the tools. You just have to be brave enough to start building. This story is more than just a tale of family drama. It is a lesson in the power of boundaries and self-worth. The first lesson is that loyalty to family should never be a one-way street. If the people who share your blood do not share your values or respect your humanity, you are not obligated to stay and be their punching bag. Respect is earned, and family is a title that can be forfeited through cruelty and neglect. Secondly, this story highlights the Phoenix principle. Sometimes your life has to be completely dismantled, smashed like a birthday cake, before you can see the potential of the raw materials you have. Joshua's transition from an architect to a dishwasher, and finally to a cake architect, proves that your skills and your character are your only true permanent assets. No one can take away your ability to build if you are willing to start from the ground up. Finally, remember that enabling a golden child destroys everyone involved. It blinded the parents to the truth. It turned Caleb into a criminal, and it nearly broke Joshua. Breaking the cycle isn't just about saving yourself. It's about refusing to participate in a lie. I want to hear from you. Which part of Joshua's journey resonated with you the most? Have you ever had to walk away from a situation to save your own peace? Share your most powerful takeaway in the comments, or simply comment "good" if these lessons hit home for you today. Your voice matters.